Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. So today we have to talk about the Dev Diary first appearance champions and perhaps about first appearance champions also themselves as well. I'm gonna kind of try and weave the two videos into one because this post is fairly big and it deserves a breakdown on its own, and obviously the monetization of the champions is a fairly big shift in itself. So there might be a follow-up video to this if I do spend too much time focusing on one of those aspects. But I'm going to start with Kabam crashed. And again, I do think this is a well put together post. I'm not going to read all of it verbatim, but the point of it is that, yeah, I think immediately after like reading something like that, you come to notice that it is entirely different caliber of person putting it together. There's a lot less things that you immediately want to protest or disagree with, and most of the people probably reading this will go like, yeah, it makes sense, it checks out, it's not a bad idea, let's go. But that's why I also think these type of posts and these type of things are deserving of much more introspection, because it's equally as important what they don't think, what they don't admit, and what they don't discuss there, as are the things that they do discuss there. And first, he explains where we are and how we got here. And effectively, he starts talking about the fact that initially, a significant portion of the income the game generated was 80% coming from us buying unit packs to get resources. And now that has dropped down to about 20% of us actually buying units to spend them on revives and potions and stuff like that. And that is largely being sold off as players are just too good now. Which immediately deserves much more nuance. That it is true that some players are significantly more skilled, but it cannot necessarily be true for the entire player base. The real thing that has changed here is the content that Kabam has been making. Kabam specifically went and made content a lot easier, and they even do reference it here with Act 6, how big of a problem it was, and that they did not feel like Act 6 should be the type of content that kind of like gatekeeps players from progressing to the higher levels. And to a large degree, I agree that I don't think story content should be the pinnacle of the difficulty, but it once was. As a result, effectively Kabam overcorrected. And now, Act 9 is nothing. Act 9 is Act 8 and Act 7. All of them are forgettable. All of them are kind of like, nah, fine. The difference, to explain it quite simply, was when Act 5.4 came out, I didn't know if I'll be able to clear it with my roster or how many units I'm going to have to buy. I was anxiously waiting for it. I was pumping myself up because I knew it's going to be hard. I'm going to get into it, and I had no sense of finality there. And then when I eventually did, felt like I accomplished something. Same thing with Act 6.1 and especially 6.2. Like, it was very, very nasty. And players were discussing these pieces of content in terms of how many Odins did you use, how many units total and stuff like that. That has long since not been the discussion about effectively any piece of content. To a point where right now, today, I don't think there's a single piece of content that Kabam would release that I would genuinely think about the idea that I have to use buy units in order to be able to clear it quickly as soon as it comes out. Right now, it is clear, obvious that anything that Kabam is going to put out, I will clear depending on how much time I have to play. It is not going to be dependent on my skill level. It's not going to be dependent on whether I'm going to have enough units or revives. And that is a culmination of many things. And most importantly, that is a culmination of a fairly easy content being released. Even quote-unquote Wheel of Fortune or whatever, Wheel of Fate, it was like 10 revives. And not everybody obviously does it as easily. The point being is, Kabam said it like it's the most challenging content they have made. No, it isn't. At no point I ever thought it would be like that hard. When they released Labyrinth of Legends, it took several Odins to clear a path. And whilst I'm not saying that that is the ideal place for the game to be, when they released, let's say, Abyss, you could say that in general it would take about 1 Odin's worth of revives to clear a path. When they released Necropolis, it took significantly less than that. So the content has gotten progressively easier. And it's not because I'm that much more skilled. Because in every single one of these pieces of content, like Labyrinth, Abyss, and Necropolis, Kabam built in Die Now button. Right? But they themselves kind of chose to push that button later. And even with the Die Now button, that effectively nullifies all my perceived skill, Abyss and Necropolis were significantly easier than Labyrinth was initially. In fact, I would go as far as to say that, Labyrinth initially was, incredibly hard. 2, 3, 4 Odins per path type of situation. Abyss, 1, 2 Odins per path. Necropolis, well below an Odin per path, if you purely count the amount of, revives and potions it would require. So, it's not the player's skill that improved that drastically, because players' skill in those pieces of content is nullified by Kabam, because they have Die Now button. And again, I don't think it's a fun button, I don't think it's a cool button, but I'm using that point to prove that it is Kabam's design and the design philosophy. Even the biggest Everest piece of content have gotten significantly easier and less resource intensive than they used to be, regardless of player's skill. Ain't that right? So, same goes just about everywhere else in the game as well. Be that AQ, be everything else. Kabam made a choice to make content easier in an attempt to make it more appealing to larger groups of players. And in places, I think that is great. However, at the same time, I do feel like they have overcorrected, because with all of the content becoming easier, Kabam also created a situation where I earn more revives and potions basically just idling in the game without actively trying out to go and farm revives or do anything else. Overall, in between, all the events, daily super events, the apothecary, the this and the that, and now the updated daily events and everything else, just about always at any given time. What's the best way to put it? Out of 2 years, for 1 year and 11 months, I and a ton of other players who have played this game for a while have resources constantly expiring. Like at any given point. Revives expiring every day, potions expiring every day. And that is the culmination of this, because Kabam barely ever, if ever, creates a content that requires any meaningful item use, and they have made quests enough that lets me earn those items very easily, and they're doing very, very bad jobs that, again, takes those revives away. And it's not because I'm skilled. Honestly, like, often enough, I now do some of these pieces of content, rush through it, and I just spam some revives. I have like 30 revives about to expire, like in next week or so. There's no new content coming, and, I just hardly pay attention to some content because, I have nothing to do with those revives. So saying that the players have gotten too good and we can't get back to the good old days, it's not a great argument here as well. Why can't we go back to like contest looked 8 years ago? First of all, I don't think they need to go back to how content looked 8 years ago, because I think there is a better way. And as often, the better way would have been a middle ground. Somewhere in between every piece of content, costs us a crap ton of revives and we have to buy a ton of units for it, to a new piece of content costs us barely any revives. Because it is quite obvious that, again, Kabam has absolutely overcorrected from content being very, very, very hard and challenging, thus gatekeeping a ton of players from progressing, to content mattering much. Because, again, for most part, majority of the content that gets released right now, the spenders, the high-end players, they don't look or think whether I can do it. They just need to find the time, and they know that they will do it. They can hardly ever revisit it or remember it. So why so many sales? So obviously they're trying to recoup the money, because we're spending less on the items and, the baseline, what he calls the baseline. And so that's why they're trying to get more revenue by selling resources, which at this point makes sense. But the framing of this situation, I'm like, okay, content is naturally changed, completely wrong. Because how we got there largely is the total sum of the decisions that Kabam has made. Like, we're not using enough items because, one, they're making easier content. Number two, we get more resources. Number three, something that I didn't talk about, they started releasing champions like, Hercules and Corvus and a whole bunch of others to just make a whole bunch of existing content and a bunch of new content kind of redundant. Why did they make champions like Hercules and Corvus and so on and so forth? They did it to sell the crystals. So they did it to, increase their profits in short term without gaming the bigger picture of how it will affect, the entire monetization of the game. And again, that is directly kind of like digging the grave that effectively they are in right now. It's not the fault of the players that Kabam choose to create overpowered attackers or champions. And the players' fault that we naturally got, somewhat more skilled and Kabam couldn't design a content that was, feasible and reasonable, even though I still think they could. They just don't because they have made a decision not to, because they don't want to release a content that a significant portion of the players, will complain about. And again, to be clear, I don't think story content should be insanely hard. I do think it should be harder than it is. Come on, Elder's difficulty and side quest had more attack than 9.3. And those are the decisions that Kabam made. But at the same time, I do think we need a piece of content that players are not guaranteed to be able to do at the very least immediately. Anybody remembers in these, old times when people were actually like building up their stash and trying to search for specific champions and ranking up specific champions and, learning specific fights in order to be able to do a quest. Now, it might be harder to go back to it right now because, people get used to things and getting them out of the habits and things that they feel entitled to is not the easiest thing in the world. But the fact that we're not in a healthy place in terms of content, 100% the decision making of Kabam, and that's the big thing that I disliked about this post, is because the initial start of it and that kind of like self-justification comes with washing their own hands in innocent. They're like, oh, it's like poor us, like players got too skilled and we couldn't do anything about it, and we just how to make money somehow. And that is why I find this part of this post at the very least intellectually dishonest. Right. So that's why so many sales. Obviously, they're trying to make more money, but in effect, they are losing money. And they're losing money despite having increased amount of sales. Why they're losing money? Because less people are willing to spend. Why less people are willing to spend? Well, overly big monetization is one big thing, but it also leads to Kabam's quality control. If we have so many bugs, if we have such crap AI, if we have so many issues with Kabam's community team and their messaging and attitude and decisions they make, they're driving people away. And despite having 3 times as many sales than they used to, they're making less money now than they used. And it's not just because of the changes the players spend money on. It's definitely also largely on the Kabam's own work. What I'm trying to say with that is that if Kabam did a good job in maintaining the game balance and structure and events and content and AI was good and there'd be less bugs and there'd be less very crappy decisions, there'd be more people playing and spending and their sales numbers wouldn't have gone down so drastically regardless of the change to the baseline. So, again, much of this post feels like they are ignoring their own participation to the situation where we have gotten in. They're presenting it as if that was the natural and expected course of action, when in fact it was a whole bunch of short-term, money-grabbing strategies that led us here. But okay, 15 minutes on that, and we're gonna put it to bed. I'm going to discuss that further in this video. We're going to discuss what's the plan and how many people are responding positively to monetizing cosmetics. And again, in theory, in the face of it, I do think that it is just about the more harmless way to monetize the game. And therefore, as an idea, I'm not against it. However, I also want to be like, I don't like it necessarily, but here's the big but. I don't think it's going to be the thing that brings the game down, for instance, or something like that. I see it more so as just an additional way for Kabam to make money, but make no mistake. If you think that this is going to reduce the other monetization that we have in the game, I think you're mistaken. Because there is no such thing as enough money. And there never has been for any business. To explain it simply, in order to believe that cosmetics will reduce the amount of sales and monetization in the game, you would also have to believe that there is amount of money that would make Kabam say, we hit our targets, we're good. We don't need more money. You have to believe that there exists as 100% of the money that Kabam has made that they are happy with. Do you think that's going to happen? I don't. Right? Because again, this post, that's why it is a good post, and I do respect Crush for wording things the way he does, because he very skillfully manages to effectively elude and hide things, like the things that I mentioned before. And here as well, he's talking about percentages of revenue and how it was 80% and how now it's only 20%, and they need to make up the remaining 80% in the sales and stuff like that. But it conveniently again puts people in a frame of mind that's like, okay, so it was 80-20 before, and now customization, if it's up, maybe Kabam can do offers of 60%, and 20% is going to be the baseline, and 20% is going to be the cosmetics. And it leads people to believe that there is 100% of the money when there isn't. Because Kabam and any company, any business wants to make more money. There is no, we have earned enough, so we're not gonna, push this next sale. For instance, Kabam looks in the November, like, oh well, we have hit all of our targets. We're doing well. We don't need to do this massive sale. Do you think we live in that world? We don't. Any company is interested in making the maximum amount of money. It could potentially ease the game if Kabam used long-term strategy thinking, which they haven't up until now for 10 years. If they did, we wouldn't be in this place in the first place, as we discussed in the first part of the video, because they have always prioritized short to medium term, money gains. We could live in a world where Kabam thinks, instead of trying to squeeze out the maximum amount of money from every player, should be focusing on acquiring and retaining and satisfying as many people as possible, so this game has more players overall and more of them are willing to spend. And even if they spend X amount of money, the game is going to make more than it does right now, because we have a significantly bigger player base. Kabam didn't go that route. Kabam hasn't gone to that route. And in my opinion, to take entirely different approach to the game and leadership and people in charge of it, for Kabam to suddenly be able to go, we're going to change the way we monetize it, we're going to fix the bugs, we're going to make sure that AI is good, we're going to make sure that the player experience is the best it can be, in order to acquire as many new players as possible, and therefore that would hit our revenue targets. Not once Kabam has done that up until now. I don't think they will do it. Therefore, the question right now, again, I'm gonna use a simple illustrative box of this. So this is Kabam's revenue target for the month or for the year, and 70% of it comes from them selling catalysts and whatnot. And 30% of it comes, or 20% of it, whatever, comes from selling cosmetics. Do you think at any point Kabam takes approach that, you know what, we have made enough money, the box is full, we don't need to push massive amount of sales, let's ease it up. Let's, not push out these offers, let's reduce the cost of these offers and just chill until the next quarter. No. If Kabam fills a box, they'll get a bigger box. And then use that money to finance another shitty game or pay themselves out a lot of bonuses. And it's not the type of thing that I'm angry at Kabam for. I think it is perfectly natural for business to do. I think any goal of any business is to make money. There is no such thing as enough money, especially for companies like this. So it is definition of that interest to generate revenue. And that's what they'll do. So for people saying that, oh, this is going to ease up the pressure, and again, because that is, the way Kabam Crashed is wording it, the real answer is just, I don't believe so. I don't think it will. I really don't. But at the same time, this is relatively unobjectionable type thing. I don't think they can do major harm here. It's going to be just yet another one of those things that Kabam's trying to use to, get you to pay up. Kind of like Relics. Relics, by the way, FYI, was an insanely expensive flop because they spent so much investing, designing, and creating relics, and they tried to incentivize players to obtain those relics by tying them to prestige, and it still failed at large. To recoup the costs of the design because players are just not particularly willing to spend on the relics. But that put aside, I think cosmetics fine. But here we are. I think they're fine, but again, I don't think they will. I don't think, regardless of how well cosmetics and selling cosmetics do, I don't think there will be a single offer that gets pushed away. I don't think there's going to be a single sales day that's not going to be a thing anymore because of cosmetics. I don't think that Kabam's ever going to say enough money and we can ease up. Because they haven't. And you can call me cynical. I'm okay with that. Just like I can say with that, by me not thinking this will make any major difference to Kabam's monetization, I don't think it brings huge amount of harm, and some people will really like it, so I think fair enough, fine. But now that we have 23 minutes on this post, I will have to actually make another video about the first appearance champions in general, because oh boy, do I have to say stuff about that too. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll catch you guys soon. Bye-bye. Hello there, guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about the